So, how do baby boomers lead in a Gen Z environment? How do we take our leadership skills that we've learned over 40 or 50 years as baby boomers, or 30 or 40 years as Gen Xers, and actually deal with the technology changes and the whole mindset changes that come from this technology era? Today, we're going to discover just how to do that, how to discover what leadership skills thrive in this current business environment. And we have an expert on the matter with us, Mike Peterson. Mike has written the book, Leading in the Age of Digital Disruption. And Mike, it is a pleasure to have you on the Wealth Ability Show.
Thank you so much, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here.
And Mike, if you would, give us a little of your background. How did you start, delving into this topic? Because it's not one that I hear other people speak about. It is one that we all experience.
I have a fairly unusual background. I have always personally been a tech nerd, a geek. I was actually in the Geek Squad in college doing computer repair, and ended up going into HR and human resources. And through HR, really learned about how to apply technology from a leadership perspective. And after about 10 years, moved my way into a head of HR role at a public pharmaceutical company, and really focused on leveraging technology to help leaders in the organization thrive. And as I went through this transformation process, the executive team was really excited about the things that we were doing, and asked me to take over responsibility for IT as well. And so for the last 5 or 6 years of my corporate career, I was responsible for both the HR department and the IT department, and learned that there really are an uncanny amount of similarities between the two functions, and
Interesting.
most people don't realize it. Um, just a little bit less than 2 years ago, I had a big health scare that made me kind of reprioritize my life, and left corporate America to start my own business, and really wanted to focus on this kind of intersection of HR and IT, and how you can actually leverage both in very similar ways to build high performing teams.
I love that. And I love that you left corporate for what I call a real job, which is being an entrepreneur. I'm the president of the Entrepreneur Fan Club, I think, because I love entrepreneurs. I think entrepreneurs actually lead the world, both figuratively and literally. Um, Technology is moving so quick right now. And we really do have this issue that some of us did not grow up with technology. I mean, my idea of a computer was, 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? And punch cards. I mean,
Yeah.
when I was in college, we used punch cards when I was in college, or we used we were doing programming in BASIC or something like that, right? We did not have this easy access programming. We certainly didn't have anything rivaling AI whatsoever. And even when we were uh, first using things, like I remember my very first real foray besides the Apple II, which we used for spreadsheets, in the tax business when I was at Ernst and Young, but also researching on LexisNexis, where we had to use Boolean connectors. So our brains are different.
Absolutely.
They're literally different than the Gen Z brains, or the millennial brains, and even a little from the Gen Xers. But how do you deal with that kind of disconnect between how fast technology is moving, and how do we take those skills that we've learned and actually make them work in that environment?
Yeah, such a good question. And I didn't have a cell phone when I was a young adult. My first connected device, so to speak, was a pager, right? And so many kids these days don't even know what a pager is, right? You would kind of go off on your own, and if someone wanted to get a hold of you, they would ring your pager with a phone number, and you'd have to go to the nearest payphone and call them back, right? There was really no way to communicate in real time, and so now technology is moving at such a rapid pace. It is sometimes hard to keep up with, right? There's Moore's law that's been around, I think, since the 60s that basically says every 10 years, technology capabilities are going to double. So it's really an exponential process.
It
And
seems like now it's like every 90 days.
yes, yeah, absolutely. The pace just keeps getting steeper and steeper. And 4 years ago when kind of AI first came out, it really wasn't AI. It was more kind of machine learning. But
Right.
today, now we're really on that cusp of the singularity and having kind of true AI. Um, and so, in my book, Leading in the Age of Digital Disruption, it really talks about how to um, bring all of this together. And so, there are kind of traditional leadership capabilities, so to speak, which is trust, um, transparent communication, as well as accountability. And it's all wrapped in this term that I use called servant leadership. And
Mhm.
servant
Right.
leadership as well isn't a new term. It's been around since the 70s. But the new application of servant leadership is really making sure that we, as a team or as a company or a function, leverage the technology that we have access to as an organization. Which now there's technology in every aspect of everything that we do every day. It's more accessible than ever, and it's easier to use than ever. And so it's really important that we uh, leverage the power and harness the power of this technology in what we do.
So let's break this down a little bit. You talk about in your book, you talk about some leadership skills that you believe are outdated. Walk us through some of those leadership skills that we'd consider classic leadership skills that you think they just don't work anymore.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily that they don't work completely. There's just a lot of misconceptions around some of these um, skills that I hear a lot of times when I'm talking to clients or I'm talking to leaders. Um, and a big one is trust, for example. So trust, when you apply that to a remote or a hybrid organization,
Right.
oftentimes the leader will say, "Well, I need to trust Tom to do his work, so I'm not going to check in on him, right? He can go off on his own and do his work." But trust doesn't need to be blind, right? I think people need to think about trust as the mutual belief that we're working in the best interest of the company. And so that doesn't mean we can't talk to each other, right? And can't build a relationship. And so it's really important that we are actively trying to build trust in everything that we do as a leader in an organization. So we are um, uh, acting consistently, we're acting empathetically, we're acting transparently, and we're communicating in real time. These are skills that aren't necessarily new, but we need to apply those skills through this new lens of technology that we have
Yeah.
access to.
You make a good point to the remote work because that's actually been a topic on the show, on the Wealthability show, many times over the last couple of years, because the workforce, as much as we want them to come back in the office, it's just not going to happen. Everybody is at least a hybrid. Okay, there are very few workforces that are truly 100% in office, which was easy, right? It's easy to verify somebody's working when they're there.
Yep.
It's easy to when you can stop in their office. It's not easy when they're 1,000 miles away on their computer and you don't really know. So we talk about, we always talk in the accounting world about trust and verify, right? You
Yeah.
have to trust and you have to verify that they are actually doing that. So how do you bring that verification skill? How do you bring that in with still being transparent and not feeling like having people feel like you're looking over their shoulder all the time?
Yeah. Yeah. That goes back to this core pillar that I talk about in the book of accountability. So there's trust, which we've already talked about, transparent communication. We can talk a little about in a little bit, and there's accountability, and they all go hand in hand. And uh, the misconception about accountability that I still hear all the time is, um, you know, Mike messed up. He missed this deadline. He never got fired, so there's no accountability here, right? They think about accountability as a consequence of negative behavior. And that's really not what we need in the world of accountability today. And so we talk about it in the book as accountability based on trust. And so we're working on the best interest of the company. We're communicating transparently what the goals and expectations are of the company, what the expectations are of me as a leader for your specific project. And then we build accountability as a kind of a transparent framework of who is doing what in the organization, when they're doing it, what are some big milestones, how do they tie into our corporate goals, right? The why of what we do is incredibly important. And if you set this framework up transparently and upfront before the work needs to be done, when employees have ownership, they generally want to succeed, right? They need to know what success looks like. And oftentimes managers just think, oh, well, I hired this person with 10 years of experience. They should just know what happens. Like I hired them because they have experience, and now they can kind of go off on their own and do what they need to do. But we really need to be specific about what success looks like. And then we can set kind of milestones to check in. So people know it's coming from a mile away rather than a manager not having any clue what's going on and feeling compelled to always check in every day. Okay, well, what's the progress? What's the progress? What's the progress? It's really important to just have these frameworks up front so that employees know what to expect.
So, so do you think that employees? So I think our human nature is not wanting to be accountable. Is my sense of human nature. We don't want to be accountable. We don't want to be told what to do. And entrepreneurs understand this because that's why we're entrepreneurs in the first place, because we don't want to be told what to do. And
Yeah.
yet accountability is certainly one of the key to successes. So how do you build that in, that accountability where you require the accountability, but they feel good about it instead of rebelling against that accountability?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that definition of success. And so when things go wrong, oftentimes it's because the vision of success wasn't as clear as it needed to be. And so in Leading in the Age of Digital Disruption, I talk about a transparent communication cycle. And so it goes back to very transparent communication up front. So a manager telling an employee what success looks like for this specific event or project or milestone, and giving an employee the space needed to do that work. And of course, if they need help, there needs to be space for them to ask questions. But in general, employees need space to do their work. And then there needs to be an opportunity for feedback. So managers can think back to their expectation, give employees feedback about what works well, what needs to be improved, and give them that space to kind of implement that feedback. And as managers get more familiar with this feedback cycle, they'll start to realize that oftentimes what they're giving feedback on is present because they weren't clear enough up front about what their expectations were. And so managers will get better and better about setting these expectations up front and then giving employees the space to really knock it out of the park once they have a very clear picture of what success looks like.
Okay. And so how do you combine that? I find it so interesting that your company combined IT with human resources sources. So how do you do that in the AI environment? How do you combine those two so that you can actually use it in a way that actually helps you with that accountability and make sure that, yes, it is getting done. Yes, this is happening, and they're not faking it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, when you're working across time zones, right? I've done a lot of work with Europe and with Asia. It can be hard, right? There's very few business hours that overlap. And so as a manager, you only have a half an hour every day or maybe an hour or two of overlap to check in with your employees. And now there are so many tools out there to help companies with what I call kind of asynchronous communication, right? So if you use a platform like Asana that is a project management tool, you can put in, kind of what the milestones are, what are the due dates, who's responsible for them, and they can not only be used as a way to track progress, but also a way to communicate updates and have information disseminated to employees so that they can read it in their own time, rather than having to constantly kind of chase updates for managers. And with those limited hours of overlap, oftentimes those information meetings will kind of get rescheduled or pushed out when managers don't have enough time.
And then how does AI play a role in this? I mean, that's what's going on right now. AI is taking over. But part of the problem, I think, is that as leaders, how do we use AI to from a leadership standpoint is really my question.
Mm, okay. Yeah. Well, so there's a, a lot of kind of easy access to AI to um, be able to have access to kind of brainstorming and thinking through things. And oftentimes, leadership decisions that we have to make can be very emotional. And a great thing that AI has access to is this wealth of information without emotion. And so we can, for example, have a conversation with ChatGPT, fill in the story about what the situation is, what's my kind of planned response to this
Mm,
employee, and and it can help you kind of take out the emotion of what you're
love
talking about.
that. So let AI do the, actually, I think in a lot of cases, let AI write the email because the AI will write the email without the emotion in it, which is what I always find is the problem with email is that we tend to put emotion when we don't have to look at them face
Hmm.
to face, right? Then there tends to be this emotion. I'm sure you've had managers working in your businesses where their emails were nothing, their personality in their email was completely different than their personality face to face, right? Face to face,
Yeah.
hey, they were great, but boy, you put them behind an email and all of a sudden they're nasty. And I'm going, so you're saying, well, let's let AI write that email for us because it'll take the emotion out of that. And that sounds like, actually sounds terrific. Like a great way using AI to actually do your work for you, where it will take the emotion out so that it actually communicates facts, not emotion.
Yeah, and face-to-face conversations or phone calls are still better than emails, but oftentimes with time differences, with everything that we have going on, it can't we can't wait
Right.
for that conversation, right? If it's always better to have real-time conversation than say, okay, we're going to save that conversation for 2 weeks until we can have it in person. And so in those instances, AI can be a great system of kind of checks and balances to make sure that your email is objective, and that you're communicating the points very succinctly rather than having this very kind of
I love that.
abrupt, emotional, angry answer.
I love that. Are you seeing AI uses for monitoring? I mean, let's take your Asana projects. We've used Asana in our business. Um, have you seen AI tools that will either A, actually develop the product, the project flow, right? Or B, actually monitor the project flow in Asana? Because for some of us as entrepreneurs, leaders, we find something like that really cumbersome, actually, because I mean, there's just a lot of step plus step plus step plus step, and we're looking for the answer, right?
Yeah,
We love a perplexity because we can just type in the question, we can get the answer just like that. So,
yeah.
entrepreneurs love that kind of stuff. Have you seen tools starting to be developed to do things like that?
Yeah, I definitely have. I think every AI is the hot keyword, right? Every company is trying to build AI into their platform, specifically to help with kind of predictive analytics, right? Where
Right.
we know where we are right now, but where if things continue at this pace, where are we going? Um, a lot of out of the box tools are still working on that solution, but there are a lot of custom tools that companies can implement fairly easily to integrate AI into what you do on an everyday basis. And those take a little bit more effort, but very, very doable if you work with a company like Apex Consulting Partners to kind of help you do that. And an example of that that I was just talking with someone about the other day is an example like employee handbooks, right? Every company that's over, say, 50 employees has an employee handbook, and bigger companies, their handbooks are oftentimes well over 100 pages.
Right.
And employees hate sifting through them, managers hate sifting through them, but everyone kind of has to play by the rules of the road. And there are now AI tools that you can integrate into your AI
Sure.
handbook and turn it into kind of a chatbot. So rather than having to sift through content, you
You
just
search
type
it.
in, yeah, you can say, I have an issue about blah, blah, blah. And it can say, here's the recommendation. It's on page 57 if you want to read more about that specific topic.
I love that. I love that. So let me ask you kind of a different question. We talked about the classic leadership skills that, may be a little outdated. What are some of the skills that you find that an older generation might have that are useful when it comes to modern technology? For example, one of the things that I found is because I had to work so hard as a young person to come up with the right question because I'd never get an answer if I didn't. I find I'm able to ask better questions to the AI bot than my young, Gen Zers can ask because it's never been difficult for them. So they haven't ever used those muscles before.
Yeah.
Are there other examples of that you can think of where, hey, maybe we actually have a plus and not a minus?
Yeah. Yeah. I think one that comes to mind right away is the ability to do research. Right. I remember, it seems like just yesterday, if I had a question, right, I was flipping through the Encyclopedia Britannica
Right.
to get the answer. And we each had this set of, 50 books that was like
Yep.
5 feet long, taking up half of our bookshelf. Um, and so as that process has evolved, we went to having to Google answers and sift through 10 web pages to now kind of Googling, and you get kind of a summary of information at the top. But that drive to kind of research and answer, I think is very, very important, uh, because while AI is very valuable and it has a tremendous capability of answering a lot of questions very quickly, it's not always 100% accurate.
Right.
And so the ability to kind of have that sniff test where you get an answer from AI and you're like, wait a second, that doesn't seem quite exactly right. Let me do a little bit more research. Where I think a lot of the younger generation will kind of just take whatever is spit out, and that's the new truth.
So how do you teach that? I mean, because that's part of the leadership skill, right? Is leaders or teachers. And so part of it is teaching them. They don't have to fight through it. It's kind of like, when I was first starting out, I had a 4 column worksheet and I literally had to put debits on the left and credits on the right. I mean, literally
Right.
that's where they went. Okay. Today's generation, they don't have to do that. They just enter the number in and they assume it's going to the right place in QuickBooks or, wherever, or it's producing the right answer. And it doesn't always produce the right answer, as you said. So
Right.
how do you train the younger generation in those skill sets that you had to develop?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great question, and I think at least part of the answer comes to developing a culture in your organization of being a learning organization. No matter how much you know, how skilled you are in one particular aspect of the business, no one is perfect. No one has the answers to everything, and it's actually okay not to have the answer to everything. But as an organization and as a leader, you want to continue to learn and have this be a cycle, right? You come up with a problem or a challenge, you learn some new ability, you apply that to your practice, overcome that challenge, continue to learn more, and continue to apply those learnings to your everyday practice. And I think a lot of organizations have a fear of failure. You know, we all want to move
Mm,
so quickly. We
yes.
all want to do the next thing bigger, faster, stronger. And part of this trust building comes with the ability to fail, right? It can't happen all day, every day, but we need to instill this comfort with being able to fail, because without failure, you can't innovate either, right? You have to learn.
Right.
You have to be willing to experiment to continue to get the best answers possible.
So some of it is just building that in your values, in your culture, and doing that. So if you're talking to a leader 40 plus, okay, we'll go there. We'll make it pretty broad. And you're saying, okay, here's three things that you could do probably to improve your organization from a leadership standpoint, given technology and where it is. What would those three things be, in your opinion?
The three things that I think are often missing are sitting right in front of us. You know, it's trust, transparent communication, and accountability. Um, uh, Now applied through this lens of technology. And
I
I'm
love,
happy to go into more detail if you want
I
me to
love it.
expand
Just
on that.
yeah, give it if you would. Just give us a one or two examples of that.
Yeah. Um, Transparent communication. I'll start there. I uh, worked with a leader recently who led a global organization, and there was a lot of uh, triangulation, and that means that people were hearing from their leader, not through their leader's mouth. So there was a lot of
Got
kind
it.
of rumor mill happening, and that was really degrading trust. And when I came in to do an assessment, really found that um, it was just because of this delay in having face-to-face communication. So when a conversation presented itself, the leader would say, "Well, let's just wait until you're in the office next week to have this conversation in person." And um, he would have the conversation with the employees that were in the office. And then they would, of course, tell the others, right? "Oh, did you
Right.
hear this?" And the other people would be like, "What? No, I haven't heard it." And so it's just a very small tweak that's needed to to really drive trust in this organization, right? Having conversations in real time. You know what? It would be better if we're in person, but I'm just going to schedule a quick Zoom meeting with Tom,
Mm.
and we're just going to have this conversation right now in real time. Um, Thinking about um, accountability, right? A lot of people think that um, it's this consequence that they need to be fired if something goes wrong. And instead of investing in making sure it goes right from the beginning, these are very simple concepts, but they manifest themselves in different ways when you're inside an organization.
I love that, and I love what you started with was employees need to know what success looks like. I think customers do too. They need
Hmm.
to know what success looks like, and we need to know what success looks like from their point of view. And I think we also need to know what success looks like from the employee's point of view. What would make this successful for you? And involving, we've had discussions with others on our the Weltability Show about how do you involve your customers in building your product? How do you involve your employees in developing your values or your culture? How do you involve them in answering these questions? And
Yeah,
it can be very simple. And what's great is now we have AI tools where you can literally ask the question without asking the question because that you can use an AI tool to ask the question, right?
yeah, yeah,
So you can just build that right in. So I think this is fascinating. Um, Mike Peterson is our guest. The The book is Leading in the Age of Digital Disruption. Mike, where would we find more about you and your business, Apex Consulting Partners?
Yeah, you can find out more information on my website, which is apexconsulting.partners. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. You're welcome to reach out anytime. And my book is launching on Tuesday, April 8th, and you should find it on Amazon or wherever else books are sold.
That's awesome. So thank you, Mike, for being on the Wealthability Show. And just remember, when we do have this transparent communication, we have the accountability, people know what success looks like. We're always going to find that we're going to make way more money by doing this. And in the end, we'll pay way less tax. We'll see y'all next time on the Wealthability Show. Thanks, everyone.
This podcast is a presentation of Rich Dad Media Network.